In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at In Bloom. In Bloom is one of Nirvana's most popular songs, and rightfully so. It's a very catchy tune, and in my opinion, it really showcases the individual talents of all three members of the band. Chris Novoselic's bass playing, Kurt Cobain's vocal and guitar work, and Dave Grohl's drumming are all on point in this song. And with particular regards to the drumming, Dave Grohl's powerful playing style really suits it perfectly. But some of the credit for the drumming arrangement should also go to Chad Channing, Nirvana's drummer from parts of 1988 on through parts of 1990. In Dave Grohl's own words, guess what Chad's responsible for? If you listen to a song like In Bloom, the intro drum lick, that's Chad who wrote that. The first studio recording of In Bloom took place a year before Nirvana would record the version which would appear on Nevermind. On April 2nd, 1990, Nirvana had a gig in Chicago, and after that performance, they made the approximately 3-hour drive north to Madison, Wisconsin to meet with producer Butch Vig at Smart Studios. Smart Studios is the location where Nirvana recorded 8 songs that were originally intended to be released in that form as the songs on their follow-up album. At the time that Nirvana recorded these songs, they were still signed to the indie record label Sub Pop. Sub Pop is a record label based in Seattle and is often regarded as one of the catalysts of the grunge movement, and rightfully so. L7, Mudhoney, Tad, Screaming Trees, Soundgarden, Nirvana, and many of the other important grunge bands have been signed to Sub Pop at one point or another. Some of these artists are still signed to Sub Pop. Nirvana's debut record Bleach was released on June 15th, 1989 by Sub Pop Records. And as mentioned, the songs that Nirvana recorded with Butch Vig in April of 1990, those songs were originally intended to be used by Sub Pop for what would eventually become Nirvana's second record. Those songs that Nirvana recorded, which were Breed, Lithium, Here She Comes Now, Polly, Dive, Stay Away, Sappy, and In Bloom, were put together into a demo tape. And that demo tape made its way around the music industry and helped to generate some major label interest for Nirvana. Some of these Smart Studio session recordings would eventually be released on Incesticide in 1992 and on the With the Lights Out box set in 2004, as well as on various other releases here and there. Eventually, Nirvana would leave Sub Pop Records and sign with DGC Records, a much larger label based in Los Angeles, partly due to the interest that that demo tape generated for Nirvana. And so it is somewhat ironic that the songs Nirvana recorded, which were originally intended to be used for Sub Pop Records for Nirvana's second album, those songs helped Nirvana leave Sub Pop Records and record their second album with DGC. Going back to April of 1990, Nirvana's lineup at the time was still Kurt Cobain, Chris Novoselic, and Chad Channing, as you would notice in Bloom's original video. The original video for In Bloom was filmed in late April of 1990 in New York City, and one of the things you may notice is that in some of the shots, Chris Novoselic has hair. In some of the other shots, Chris Novoselic is completely bald. That is because on April 26th of 1990, Nirvana had a gig in New York City, and Chris Novoselic was not happy with his performance. He felt that he had a really bad performance, and as penance, as a way to punish himself, he completely shaved his head. The original video for In Bloom is a black and white video, and it's essentially just the band walking around different parts of New York City and jamming in some of the other shots together. Fast forward about a year now to the late spring of 1991, and Chad Channing is no longer in Nirvana. I talk more in detail about how that actually happened in my video for Lithium. If you want to see that, it is in the description box below. Essentially, Chad and Kurt, over the course of the 2 years they were together, a creative tension was slowly building and building up. Chad wanted to be more involved with the songwriting process, whereas Kurt felt that Chad's drumming was not where he wanted it to be. Eventually, this led to Chad's departure from the band. Although on a personal level, Chad had no beef with Kurt Cobain or Chris Novoselic. They all remained friendly with each other. It's just creatively things didn't work out as is the case with bands sometimes. After brief stints with Dale Crover and Dan Peters in the summer of 1990, by September of 1990, Nirvana had settled on Dave Grohl as their drummer. The final piece of the Nirvana puzzle was there. Nirvana began recording Nevermind at Sound City Studios in Los Angeles with Butch Vig in May of 1991. And one of the first songs the band recorded with Butch Vig was In Bloom. Butch Vig was already familiar with recording that song due to their previous session in April of 1990, so it made sense for both parties to record a song that they had already worked on together. There was a familiarity already there, especially because the musical arrangement for In Bloom was pretty much the same way that it was when they recorded it together back in April of 1990. As is the case with Drain You, the Nevermind recording of In Bloom features Dave Grohl singing harmonies with Kurt Cobain at various points in the song. When it came to Kurt's vocal recordings, Butch Vig had to change the input levels on the fly. In other words, Butch Vig had to change the levels as he was recording Kurt oftentimes because Kurt's vocal intensity would change during his different takes. As is the case with many of Nirvana's songs, In Bloom goes from quiet to loud throughout the song. Kurt used different guitar amps while recording the verses and the chorus for In Bloom. On Butch Vig's recommendation, Kurt used a Fender Bassman amp to record the chorus, an amp which is known for its heavy sound. And for the verses, Kurt used a Mesa Boogie guitar amp. In Bloom is a song with heavy distortion, loud drums, bass, and guitars. Yet, at the same time, it's very melodic and catchy. In Chris Novoselic's own words, Nevermind is a very safe record. It's pop. It's just that the guitars are heavy. When it comes to the meaning behind In Bloom, it's generally accepted that Kurt is addressing the fact that since Nirvana started finding success with Bleach, a lot of new fans started showing up to their shows who didn't really understand the message in Nirvana's songs. Kurt felt that many of these new fans didn't get the point of his music and simply sang along with his songs without understanding what they were actually about. Hence, the line in Bloom, "He's the one who likes all our pretty songs, and he likes to sing along, but he knows not what it means, knows not what it means." Ironically, In Bloom became one of Nirvana's most mainstream popular songs. It's also generally accepted that In Bloom is partly about Kurt's friend, Dylan Carlson. In Bloom was released as a single over a year after Nevermind was released. Nevermind was released on September 24th, 1991, and In Bloom was released as a single on November 30th, 1992. It was only released commercially as a single in the UK, while promotional copies of In Bloom were released in the US. In the UK, In Bloom is the A-side of the single, and depending on which pressing of In Bloom you're looking at, either a live performance of Polly or a live performance of Polly and a live performance of Sliver are the two B-sides. In Bloom reached number 28 on the British singles chart and number 5 on the Billboard Album Rock Tracks chart in the US, even though it wasn't released as a single in the US. The song was generally well received by critics and fans alike. For example, In Bloom was ranked number 415 on Rolling Stone magazine's 2011 list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. The music video for the Nevermind version of In Bloom was released in 1992. And it's essentially a parody of The Ed Sullivan Show. In Kurt's own words, he was so tired from the last year of people taking us so seriously. We made a parody video to show them that we have a humorous side to us. Take a look at this interview clip of mine with Alice Wheeler, a close friend of Kurt Cobain who also worked as a Nirvana photographer, where she discusses Kurt Cobain's excitement about making the In Bloom music video.
Who was he like as a person? What was he really like?
Well, I mean, he was like a lot of other guys that I knew in the scene here. Kind of sensitive, you know, really interested in his art, really super passionate, had a lot of really specific ideas about stuff. Like, if you could sit down and talk to him, like, one time when I ran into him when he was famous, he was telling me about the video that they made for In Bloom and how they got the old film footage left over from the 60s, and they got the same camera that they used to film the Ed Sullivan Show, and they had like all these details, like they were all working in his mind, like he was creating this image. He had this idea about what he wanted to do, and it was really fantastic. You know, that's why I liked him, was because like every time we would hang out, we would sit down and have these big conversations about ideas and different things.
All in all, In Bloom continues to be one of Nirvana's most popular songs, and for good reason. If you like Nirvana, please make sure to subscribe. I have a lot more Nirvana videos here, and there's going to be a lot more coming. Thank you for watching.